London, 1854. Olivia Wellington clutched the worn letter in her trembling hands as the carriage rattled through the rain-soaked streets of London. The expensive paper had thinned from countless readings, its edges frayed like the remnants of her once respectable life. The letter, formal, cold, and inescapable, contained her new reality. A position has been arranged for you at Thornfield Hall. The Duke of Ravencrest requires a companion for his ailing sister. Your father's debt will be forgiven upon completion of 1 year's service. 1 year in exchange for her father's gambling debts. 1 year to save what remained of her family's name. Olivia folded the letter and tucked it into her reticule, smoothing her plain grey travelling dress. Once, she had worn silks and satins as the daughter of Viscount Wellington. Now, after his death and the discovery of his enormous debts, she wore the practical garments of a woman who had fallen from grace. No one of quality would marry a pauper with a disgraced name, she whispered to herself, reciting the painful lesson society had taught her these past months. Love is a luxury afforded only to those with fortune or flawless reputation. I have neither. The carriage slowed as it approached the imposing iron gates of Thornfield Hall. Beyond them, partially obscured by mist and ancient oaks, rose a Gothic manor house of dark stone, its windows like watchful eyes against the twilight. Olivia shivered despite herself. Tales of the reclusive Duke of Ravencrest had reached even London drawing rooms, a scarred war veteran who had returned from India with strange habits and stranger company. Miss Wellington, the footman who opened her carriage door, was dressed in black, his face expressionless. His Grace expects you in the library. Olivia gathered her meagre belongings and followed him up the stone steps, past carved gargoyles whose eyes seemed to track her progress. Inside, the grand entrance hall was dimly lit by candles that created more shadows than illumination. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their painted eyes following her slight figure as she crossed the marble floor. "Miss Wellington, Your Grace," the footman announced, opening the library door and stepping aside. The library was cavernous, lined with leather-bound books from floor to ceiling. A fire burned in the massive hearth, but its warmth seemed unable to penetrate the chill that permeated the air. At first, Olivia thought the room empty until a deep voice emerged from the shadows beyond the firelight. "Miss Wellington, you've arrived at last." The Duke of Ravencrest stepped into the light, and Olivia struggled to maintain her composure. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed impeccably in black evening attire that emphasized his powerful frame. His face might once have been considered handsome, with its strong jaw and aristocratic features, but now the left side bore a jagged scar that ran from temple to jaw. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, though he couldn't have been much past 35. But it was his eyes that arrested her, pale grey, almost colourless, and filled with such intense scrutiny that Olivia felt he could see through her practiced facade to the fear beneath. "Your Grace," she curtsied, grateful that her voice remained steady, "I thank you for this position." "Do you?" The Duke's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, though no warmth reached his eyes. "I wonder if you'll still feel gratitude once you understand what awaits you here." He moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into a crystal glass. "Your father's debts were considerable. I did not purchase them out of charity." "I never presumed you did, Your Grace." Olivia clasped her hands to still their trembling. "I understand business transactions. I am here to fulfill my part of the arrangement." "Are you?" He studied her over the rim of his glass. "And what do you believe that arrangement to be, precisely?" "I am to serve as companion to your sister for 1 year, after which my father's debts will be considered paid." The Duke's laugh was sharp and sudden, startling in the silence of the library. "Companion, yes, I suppose that's one way of describing it." He set down his glass and approached her, circling slowly as if assessing a purchase. "My sister requires more than mere companionship, Miss Wellington. She requires protection." "Protection from what, Your Grace?" He stopped directly before her, close enough that she could smell the sandalwood and spice scent of him, could see the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of pain rather than laughter. "From herself, Miss Wellington, from the curse that binds her, the same curse that now binds you." Olivia's heart stuttered. "I don't understand." No, his voice softened slightly. "You don't. Not yet. He turned away, moving toward a portrait above the mantelpiece, a beautiful dark-haired woman whose eyes held the same coldness as the Duke's. While I was in India, I acquired certain artifacts. My sister, being of a curious nature, interfered where she should not have. She has paid the price for it, as have I. What price, Your Grace? Olivia asked, a chill running down her spine. You'll see soon enough. He turned back to her, and for an instant, Olivia thought she glimpsed something like sorrow in his expression before it hardened again. You were chosen for a reason, Miss Wellington. Not just because of your father's debts, but because you possess something rare, sensitivity to things beyond the ordinary world. Olivia stiffened. How could he know about the whispers she sometimes heard, the shadows she sometimes saw? The strange insights that had plagued her since childhood, insights that had led her governess to warn her never to speak of them, lest she be deemed unstable or worse. I don't know what you mean, she said carefully. Don't you? The Duke's gaze was piercing. I think you do. Your sensitivity is why you're here. Without it, you cannot help my sister. Without it, you cannot break the curse. Before Olivia could respond, the library door burst open. A slender woman in a white nightgown stood in the doorway, her long dark hair loose around her shoulders, her face pale as moonlight. Her eyes, the same pale grey as the Duke's, were wide and unseeing. Ophelia, the Duke said softly, moving toward her with gentle hands, you should be resting. The woman, Ophelia, didn't seem to hear him. Her gaze fixed on Olivia with unnerving intensity. You've brought her, she whispered, the one who hears the whispers, but can she bear what they will tell her? She trembled violently. The shadows are gathering, brother. They know she's here. Olivia stepped forward, drawn by something she couldn't name, the woman's distress, perhaps, or the strange familiarity of her words. Lady Ophelia, The moment Olivia's hand touched Ophelia's arm, a shock passed between them. The library disappeared, replaced by a vision of a stone chamber lit by flickering torches. In the center stood an altar carved with symbols Olivia didn't recognize. Upon it lay a small golden box, intricately decorated with jewels that gleamed like eyes in the torchlight. As quickly as it had come, the vision vanished. Olivia found herself back in the library, steadied by the Duke's strong hands on her shoulders. Ophelia had collapsed to the floor, unconscious, her face serene for the first time since her appearance. What happened? Olivia gasped, her heart racing. What did I see? The Duke's expression was grim as he lifted his sister in his arms. You've seen the beginning of it all. The source of our curse. His eyes met hers, and Olivia saw both challenge and desperation in their depths. Still wish to fulfill your obligation, Miss Wellington. You may leave now, though your father's debts will remain. I will not hold an unwilling participant to this bargain. Olivia should have been terrified, should have demanded to be taken back to London immediately. Instead, she felt a strange certainty settle over her. All her life, she had been told her sensitivities were a weakness, a flaw to be hidden. Now, perhaps they might be a strength. I will stay, she said quietly. I will help Lady Ophelia. Something flickered in the Duke's eyes, relief perhaps or respect. He nodded once. Then prepare yourself, Miss Wellington. The shadows, as my sister calls them, will not surrender their hold easily. As if in answer to his words, the candles in the library guttered, though no draught disturbed the air. In their momentary dimming, Olivia thought she saw figures moving in the darkened corners of the room, figures that vanished when the light steadied again. Thornfield Hall keeps its secrets well, the Duke said, watching her reaction. But not from those who can hear them whisper. And in that moment, as the rain lashed against the windows and the wind moaned through the ancient stones, Olivia Wellington knew she had stepped into a world where all she had believed about reality would be challenged. Yet something deeper than fear compelled her to remain, a sense that here, finally, she might discover why she had always felt different, why she had always felt alone. For better or worse, her fate was now bound to the mysteries of Thornfield Hall, to the tormented sister who lay unconscious in her brother's arms, and to the scarred Duke whose grey eyes held secrets darker than any she could imagine. The weeks that followed settled into an uneasy routine. During the day, Olivia attended Lady Ophelia, whose moments of lucidity were rare but precious. When coherent, the Duke's sister revealed herself to be intelligent and gentle, with a scholar's knowledge of ancient languages and cultures. In these moments, Olivia glimpsed the woman Ophelia had been before whatever had happened in India, before the curse the Duke spoke of so reluctantly. The rest of the time, Ophelia existed in a world of her own, speaking to unseen presences, crying out in languages Olivia didn't recognize, drawing strange symbols that she would later destroy in fits of terror. Olivia learned to anticipate the shifts in her charge's condition, a certain tension in the air, a drop in temperature, the subtle darkening of the corners of Ophelia's chambers that signaled another episode approaching. The Duke himself remained an enigma. He appeared at unexpected moments, materializing in doorways or corridors as if conjured from the shadows themselves. Sometimes he would simply observe Olivia's interactions with his sister, his expression unreadable. Other times he would ask probing questions about what Olivia had seen or heard, particularly on those occasions when Ophelia spoke directly to her apparent hallucinations. "Did you see them?" he asked one evening, after Olivia had spent hours calming Ophelia following a particularly violent episode. "Not clearly," Olivia admitted, exhausted but unwilling to show weakness. "Shapes only." "But I heard," she hesitated, reluctant to sound as mad as her charge sometimes appeared. "Tell me," the Duke insisted, moving closer. In the lamplight his scar appeared less harsh, a mark of humanity rather than disfigurement. Whispering, not in English, it seemed to respond to Ophelia's distress, to feed on it. Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Your Grace, I cannot help effectively if I don't understand what we're facing. You speak of a curse, of shadows, but offer no explanation." For a moment, she thought he would dismiss her again with his usual cryptic responses. Instead, he sighed deeply and gestured for her to follow him. They walked in silence through the dark corridors of Thornfield Hall until they reached a small, locked room in the east wing. The Duke produced a key from his waistcoat pocket. "Few have entered this room since our return from India," he said quietly. "What you see here must remain between us." The room beyond was unlike any Olivia had seen in the house. The walls were covered with maps and drawings of temple ruins. Glass cases displayed artifacts that seemed out of place in an English manner, small statues of multi-armed deities, ceremonial daggers with curved blades, fragments of stone tablets covered in unfamiliar script. But it was the item at the center of the room that drew Olivia's attention, a small golden box resting on a velvet cushion, the same box from her vision. "The Pandora Reliquary," the Duke said, watching her reaction closely. "At least that's what the British Museum scholars named it when it was discovered in the ruins of a temple near Delhi. They believed it dated back to Alexander's time, a curious fusion of Greek and Hindu craftsmanship." He approached the box but did not touch it. "The museum sent an expedition to recover it. I was asked to accompany them, having some knowledge of the region from my military service." "And your sister joined you?" Olivia asked, feeling a strange resonance from the box, as if it was somehow aware of her presence. She insisted. Ophelia was always fascinated by antiquities. A shadow passed over the Duke's face. "The local people warned us not to disturb the temple. They spoke of an ancient binding spell, a curse placed to contain entities that were neither god nor demon, but something in between." Naturally, the expedition leaders dismissed such superstitions. "But you didn't." "I had seen enough in India to know that Western arrogance often blinds us to truths we simply lack the framework to understand." The Duke's voice grew distant, as if recalling memories he'd rather forget. "When the box was uncovered, there were incidents, workers falling ill with inexplicable symptoms, strange sounds at night. Ophelia was fascinated rather than frightened. She spent hours studying the inscriptions on the box." He paced the small room, unable to remain still as he continued. "I was called away to meet with local officials. When I returned," his voice faltered, "I found the expedition members dead or dying. And Ophelia with the box open before her, surrounded by shadows that moved with purpose and intelligence." Olivia's breath caught. "What happened?" "I managed to close the box, but not before." He stopped abruptly, his hand unconsciously moving to his scarred face. "Not before something escaped, something that attached itself to Ophelia. And to me, though to a lesser extent," his grey eyes fixed on hers. "We are bound to them, Miss Wellington, ancient entities that feed on fear and despair. They cannot fully manifest in our world, but they can influence it, and us." especially those of us who are sensitive. Like Ophelia, Olivia whispered, and me. Yes, the Duke's gaze was penetrating. You felt it since your arrival, haven't you? The whispers. The sense of being watched. Olivia nodded slowly, unwilling to admit how accurately he had described her experience. But why bring me here? How can I possibly help? Because you can see them, hear them, yet remain separate from them. Ophelia is too deeply entangled now. I can resist their influence, but cannot perceive them clearly enough to fight them directly. He took a step closer to her. There are stories, ancient texts suggesting that one with the right sensitivity might be able to communicate with these entities. To negotiate terms. Terms for what? Their release and ours. The Duke's voice was barely above a whisper. The local priests warned that containing such beings was dangerous, that eventually the containment itself becomes a prison for both captor and captive. Olivia stared at the golden box, understanding dawning. You want me to help free them? Wouldn't that be dangerous? More dangerous than the current situation. My sister fades a little more each day. The entities grow stronger as she weakens. And he broke off, but not before Olivia glimpsed the toll this ordeal had taken on him. Beneath his commanding exterior lay exhaustion and fear, not for himself, she realized, but for Ophelia. You've been fighting them alone, she said softly. For how long? 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, he replied with precision that spoke volumes about his suffering. Since our return from India. Something shifted in Olivia's understanding of the Duke of Ravencrest. Not a reclusive eccentric, but a man desperately trying to save his sister while battling forces beyond normal comprehension. His coldness was armor, his distance a shield, not just for himself, but for anyone who might come too close. I will help, she said simply. Tell me what I must do. Relief briefly softened his features before his composure returned. It begins with understanding. You must learn to recognize them, to distinguish one entity from another. Only then can we determine which might be reasoned with. And the texts you mentioned, the ones that speak of negotiation. In my study. We'll begin tonight. He moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at her. Miss Wellington, Olivia, you should know that this path holds real danger, not just to your peace of mind, but potentially to your life. I would not blame you for reconsidering. The use of her given name startled her almost as much as the genuine concern in his voice. And if I leave, what becomes of you and Lady Ophelia? The Duke's silence was answer enough. Then I stay, Olivia said firmly. After all, Your Grace, I've little enough to return to. At least here my peculiarities might prove useful rather than embarrassing. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. Oliver, he said quietly. My name is Oliver Xavier, Duke of Ravencrest. If we are to face these shadows together, perhaps we might dispense with formalities when we are alone. It was a small concession, yet Olivia understood its significance. A first, tentative lowering of the walls he had built around himself. Oliver, she echoed, testing the name. Then we should begin our work, Oliver. And so began a strange partnership in the gloom of Thornfield Hall. By day, Olivia tended to Ophelia, whose condition continued to deteriorate despite moments of startling clarity. By night, she joined Oliver in his study, poring over ancient texts and learning to identify the entities that haunted the shadows. There were 3 distinct presences, Oliver believed. One seemed to feed particularly on fear, growing stronger when Ophelia was terrified. Another thrived on despair and hopelessness. The third, and most dangerous, fed on desire, distorting natural longings into obsession and madness. Slowly, Olivia learned to sense their individual signatures, subtle differences in the chill they brought, the quality of shadow they cast, the particular whispers they employed. And as her awareness grew, so did her ability to resist their influence. They're testing you, Oliver told her one night, after she had successfully identified the Fear-Eater's presence in the library. Learning your vulnerabilities. As I am learning theirs, Olivia replied with more confidence than she felt. In truth, the constant vigilance was exhausting. The entities had begun appearing in her dreams, twisting memories of past humiliations and disappointments into nightmares that left her gasping awake. Oliver noticed her fatigue, but said nothing directly. Instead, he began ensuring small comforts appeared in her rooms: freshly cut flowers, books she had expressed interest in, a particularly fine shawl when the autumn chill deepened. These gestures, never acknowledged between them, touched Olivia more deeply than grand pronouncements might have. As autumn faded into winter, the dynamic between them shifted subtly. Their discussions ranged beyond the immediate problem of the entities, into literature, philosophy, and their personal histories. Oliver spoke of his military service, of the idealism that had driven him to India and the disillusionment that followed. Olivia shared the isolation of her childhood, the mother who had died young, the father who had gambled away their security in desperate attempts to numb his grief. "We are both orphans of a sort," Oliver observed one evening as they sat before the fire in his study. "Both accustomed to standing alone. Perhaps that's why the entities haven't turned us against each other," Olivia mused. "They feed on connection, the fear of losing it, the despair when it's broken, the desire that can become possessive." Oliver's gaze lingered on her face, illuminated by the firelight. "Yet connection is also what strengthens us against them." The statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Olivia looked away first, returning to the Sanskrit text before her. "There's something here," she said, pointing to a passage, "about containment versus release. It suggests that these entities were originally guardians of some kind, bound to the temple to protect sacred knowledge. But over centuries, the binding ritual was corrupted or misunderstood. Instead of willing guardians, they became prisoners. And prisoners inevitably seek freedom," Oliver said, leaning closer to examine the text. His shoulder brushed hers, a brief contact that sent warmth through Olivia despite the perpetual chill of the house. "It says the binding must be undone in a specific way," she continued, trying to ignore her reaction to his proximity. "A ritual of acknowledgement and release, performed by someone who can see the entities clearly." "You," Oliver said simply. "Yes, but there's more." Olivia frowned, struggling with the translation. "Something about payment, no sacrifice. The seer must offer that which is most valued. That sounds ominous." "Most ancient rituals demand sacrifice of some kind." Oliver's voice was thoughtful. "The question is what form it takes." Before Olivia could respond, a scream echoed through the house, Ophelia's voice, high and terrified. They rushed from the study, racing through corridors that seemed to lengthen unnaturally, shadows deepening around them despite the lamps they carried. They found Ophelia standing at the top of the grand staircase, her white nightgown billowing around her like spectral wings. Her eyes were wide and unseeing, fixed on something visible only to her. "They're coming," she whispered as Oliver and Olivia approached cautiously. "They've decided." "Decided what, Ophelia?" Oliver asked gently, reaching for his sister's hand. Ophelia's gaze shifted to Olivia, suddenly lucid and terribly sad. "They know how to break her, through him, through you." Her focus returned to Oliver. "Brother, they have seen how you look at her. They know what grows between you." A chill that had nothing to do with the drafty hall ran through Olivia, the desire eater. It had sensed the feelings she had been trying to deny, feelings for Oliver that had transformed from respect to something far more dangerous. "Ophelia, come away from the stairs," Oliver said, his voice steady despite the tension Olivia could see in his shoulders. "Too late," Ophelia breathed. "They're here." The lamps went out simultaneously, plunging the hall into darkness broken only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. In that silver illumination, Olivia saw them clearly for the first time, not just shadows or half-glimpsed movements, but distinct forms surrounding Ophelia. 3 figures made of darkness deeper than night, vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting, their edges blurring into the air around them. One of them, the Desire Eater, Olivia knew instinctively, detached itself from Ophelia and drifted toward Oliver. It circled him, a tendril of darkness reaching out to caress his scarred cheek in a parody of affection. "No," Olivia cried, lunging forward without thinking. The entity turned toward her, its form shifting to mirror her own but twisted, darkened. When it spoke, the words came not as sound but as impressions directly in her mind. "He will never want you, a fallen woman with nothing to offer. His pity is not love." Olivia faltered, the words striking at her deepest insecurities. In that moment of weakness, the entity surged toward her, engulfing her in cold darkness that seeped into her very bones. Distantly, she heard Oliver calling her name, felt his hands gripping her shoulders. But the entity's presence filled her consciousness, forcing her to see visions of Oliver turning away from her in disgust, of Ophelia dead by her own hand, of Olivia herself returning to London in disgrace, shunned by all. "This is your future," the entity whispered. "Unless you leave now, leave him to us. We are bound to the siblings, not to you. You can escape." "Olivia," Oliver's voice broke through, desperate and commanding. "Look at me, not at it. Focus on my voice." With tremendous effort, Olivia dragged her attention back to the physical world. Oliver's face swam into view, his grey eyes intense with concern and something else, something that gave her strength to push back against the entity's invasion. "I see you," she gasped, not to Oliver but to the darkness surrounding her. "I know what you are, a prisoner, not a demon, a guardian corrupted by centuries of binding." The entity recoiled slightly, its form wavering. "Olivia, be careful," Oliver warned, still gripping her shoulders. But Olivia had understood something crucial in that moment of connection with the entity. "It doesn't want to destroy," she said wonderingly. "It wants recognition, acknowledgement of what it once was." She turned back to the shadow figure. "You were meant to protect, weren't you? To guard the temple and its knowledge. Not to be imprisoned in a box, carried far from your sacred charge." The entity's form shifted again, stabilizing into something more defined, a figure that might once have been revered rather than feared. "Olivia, the other two," Oliver said urgently. "They're still with Ophelia." Indeed, the remaining entities had wrapped themselves around Ophelia, who stood unnaturally still, her eyes now closed as if in deep trance. "We need to perform the ritual," Olivia said, her mind racing. "Now, while I can see them clearly." The texts," Oliver began. "No time," Olivia interrupted. "I understand what's needed." She moved toward Ophelia and the entities, her steps deliberate despite the fear coursing through her. "I acknowledge you, guardians of ancient wisdom," she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. "Bound against your nature, corrupted by captivity." The entities rippled, their attention now fixed on Olivia. "I offer release from your binding," she continued, drawing on half-translated texts and her own intuitive understanding of these beings. "Return to your true purpose, neither bound nor binding those who freed you." "Sacrifice," came the whispered thought. "The ritual demands sacrifice." "What sacrifice?" Olivia asked aloud. "What do you require?" "That which you value most." Olivia hesitated, uncertain. What did she value most? Once it would have been her reputation, her place in society. But those concerns seemed hollow now, after all she had experienced at Thornfield Hall. With sudden clarity, she understood. What she valued most was her hard-won independence, the emotional walls she had built to protect herself from rejection and pain. The belief that she needed no one, that love was a luxury she could live without. "I offer my protection," she said softly, "the walls I've built around my heart." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ophelia gasped, her eyes flying open as the entities surrounding her shuddered and began to dissolve, their forms breaking apart like smoke in wind. "Olivia," Oliver called out in warning. The Desire Eater, still partially connected to Olivia, made one final assault. Images flooded her mind, Oliver laughing at her naivety, the Tun mocking her presumption that a duke could care for a disgraced viscount's daughter, the inevitable heartbreak that awaited her if she surrendered her carefully maintained defenses. Olivia wavered, the old fears threatening to overwhelm her newfound resolve. Then she felt Oliver's hand close around hers, warm and solid in the midst of the entity's cold illusions. "I see you," Oliver said, not to the entity but to Olivia herself. "I have always seen you." The simple truth in his words gave Olivia the strength she needed. "I release you," she told the entity, "and I release myself from fear of what might come. From the belief that I am unworthy of love." A sound like distant thunder rolled through the hall. The entity's forms dissolved completely, leaving behind a sense of absence, a void quickly filled by ordinary moonlight and shadow. Ophelia collapsed, caught by Oliver before she could fall down the stairs. "Is it over?" Olivia asked, scarcely daring to believe the stillness that had settled over the hall. Oliver looked from his unconscious sister to Olivia, his expression a mixture of wonder and concern. "I believe so," he said carefully, "but at what cost?" Olivia helped him carry Ophelia back to her chambers. The Duke's sister seemed to be sleeping naturally for the first time in years, her face peaceful, her breathing deep and even. "We should let her rest," Oliver said quietly, leading Olivia from the room. In the corridor, he stopped and turned to her, his expression grave. "What you did was incredibly dangerous." "It worked," Olivia pointed out, suddenly exhausted now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Yes, but," Oliver ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure. "Olivia, do you understand what you sacrificed, what you offered them?" "My walls," she said simply, "the barriers I've maintained since my father's death. Since society showed me exactly how conditional their acceptance was. And do you understand what that means?" His voice was gentle now, almost tender. "To live without those walls." Olivia met his gaze steadily, despite the vulnerability she felt. "It means risk, the possibility of pain," she took a deep breath, "but also the possibility of joy, of connection." Oliver studied her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, as if giving her time to retreat, he raised a hand to her cheek. "You are the bravest person I have ever known," he said softly, "and the most remarkable." The warmth of his touch, the sincerity in his eyes, made Olivia's breath catch. This was what she had sacrificed her walls for, this moment of genuine connection, free from the shadows that had haunted them both. "What happens now?" she asked, aware that dawn was approaching, bringing with it a new day and new realities. Oliver's hand fell away reluctantly. "Now you rest," he said. Tomorrow we begin to discover who we are without our respective shadows." As winter yielded to spring, Thornfield Hall transformed. Windows long shuttered were thrown open to admit sunlight and fresh air. Rooms that had stood empty for years were cleaned and furnished. The staff, who had moved like ghosts through darkened corridors, now went about their duties with lighter steps and occasional laughter. The most profound transformation, however, was in the hall's inhabitants. Ophelia, freed from the entity's influence, regained her strength and clarity. The brilliant, curious woman Oliver had described emerged from the shell of the tormented invalid Olivia had first encountered. She took particular interest in cataloguing and properly storing the artifacts from India, determined that the knowledge they contained should be preserved, but their power respected. Oliver himself changed in subtle but significant ways. The rigid control he had maintained began to ease. He smiled more often, laughed occasionally, a rich, deep sound that never failed to warm Olivia when she heard it. The scar that marked his face seemed less harsh as the tension around it softened. He began riding out across his estates again, reacquainting himself with tenants long neglected during his self-imposed isolation. As for Olivia, the sacrifice she had made during the ritual left her feeling both vulnerable and strangely liberated. Without the protective barriers she had maintained for so long, she experienced both joy and pain more intensely. She wept over poetry she had once read with detached appreciation. She laughed unreservedly at Ophelia's wry observations, and she felt, with sometimes overwhelming clarity, her growing feelings for Oliver. They had not spoken directly of those feelings, though the connection between them deepened with each passing day. Their conversations ranged widely, their silences grew comfortable, and their accidental touches, a hand brushing when passing a book, shoulders meeting as they walked Thornfield's gardens, carried an electricity neither could deny. Yet always there remained the awareness of their different stations. He a duke, she a viscount's daughter whose reputation had been tarnished by her father's disgrace. The year of service Olivia had agreed to was half completed now. What would happen when it ended? The question lingered between them, unasked and unanswered. It was Ophelia who finally forced the issue with characteristic directness. "This is becoming absurd," she announced one evening as the three of them sat in the library after dinner. "Oliver, you stare at Olivia when you think no one is watching. Olivia, you blush whenever my brother enters a room. Yet neither of you speaks of what is plainly obvious to everyone in this house." "Ophelia," Oliver said warningly, "no, brother, I watched you fight shadows for 3 years to protect me." I will not watch you deny yourself happiness out of some misplaced sense of propriety or concern for my welfare. Ophelia turned to Olivia. My brother believes himself unworthy of love because of what happened in India. He blames himself for my condition, for the deaths of the expedition members, for failing to heed the warnings we were given. Ophelia, that's enough, Oliver said sharply, rising from his chair. It's true though, isn't it? Ophelia pressed. You've punished yourself these past years, isolating yourself from society, from any possibility of happiness. Oliver's expression closed, the mask of the remote Duke sliding back into place. This conversation is over. He strode from the library, the door closing firmly behind him. Ophelia sighed, looking at Olivia apologetically. I shouldn't have been so blunt. But I couldn't bear to see you both suffering unnecessarily. He hasn't spoken of his feelings, Olivia said carefully. I cannot presume. Cannot presume, Ophelia interrupted with a laugh. Olivia, the man has rejected every eligible young woman presented to him for years. Yet since your arrival, he has emerged from his shell, engaged with the world again. Do you truly not see how he looks at you? Olivia hesitated. She had noticed changes in Oliver's behavior toward her, small gestures of thoughtfulness, conversations that stretched late into the night, moments when his guard dropped completely and she glimpsed the man beneath the ducal facade. But she had attributed these changes to gratitude for her help with the entities, perhaps friendship developing between them. To believe there might be more felt dangerous, a vulnerability greater than any she had risked before. Even if what you suggest is true, she said slowly, there are considerations beyond personal feelings. My reputation can be restored, Ophelia finished firmly. Oliver is a duke. His choice of bride would be accepted regardless of past scandals, especially ones as minor as your father's debts. Bride, Olivia's voice came out as a whisper. Ophelia, your brother has never indicated. Because he believes he is protecting you. From society's judgment, from the lingering effects of our ordeal in India, Ophelia's expression softened, and perhaps from his own heart, which he has guarded as carefully as you once guarded yours. Olivia sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. Could it be true? Had Oliver developed feelings for her that matched her own for him? And if so, what was she to do with this knowledge? Talk to him, Ophelia advised gently. Before pride and fear create new walls between you. Olivia found Oliver in his study, standing before the window that overlooked Thornfield's grounds. The spring moon cast silver light across the gardens, transforming them into a landscape of light and shadow far different from the oppressive darkness that had once filled the house. Your sister means well, Olivia said softly, closing the door behind her. Oliver didn't turn. Ophelia has always been direct to the point of impropriety, a family trait, I'm afraid. One I've come to appreciate. Olivia moved further into the room, her heart beating rapidly. Oliver, is what she said true? Have you been holding yourself apart out of concern for me? Now he did turn, his expression guarded. Ophelia oversimplifies. There are practical considerations. No, Olivia interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. No more evasions. I sacrificed my walls during the ritual. Can you not do the same now? Oliver's breath caught visibly. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his grey eyes reflecting the moonlight. Then with deliberate care, he closed the distance between them. What would you have me say, Olivia? He asked, his voice low and intense. That from the moment you stood in this study, refusing to be intimidated by either my title or my scars, you fascinated me. That watching you face down ancient entities with courage, I can scarcely comprehend, made me question everything I believed about strength. That seeing you with Ophelia, patient and kind, even at her worst moments, showed me a quality of heart I had thought lost to this world. Olivia's own heart seemed to stop at his words, then resume at twice its normal pace. Oliver, I have watched you bloom here, he continued, as if unable to stop now that he had begun. Watched you step into your own power, claim your gifts without shame. And I have wanted, with an intensity that frightens me, to be worthy of the woman you've become. His hand rose to hover near her cheek, not quite touching. But I am scarred in more ways than what you see. The shadows may be gone, but their memory remains. And your life, your future should not be bound to such darkness. Olivia caught his hand in hers, pressing it against her cheek. Do you think I haven't considered this? That I haven't weighed every aspect of what it would mean to tie my life to yours? She held his gaze steadily. I know who you are, Oliver Xavier. I have seen your darkness and your light. I choose both. Something broke in Oliver's expression, the last barrier falling away to reveal naked vulnerability and hope. Olivia, he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. Then he was kissing her, his arms drawing her close as if he feared she might vanish. Olivia responded with all the feeling she had kept contained for months, her hands sliding into his hair as the kiss deepened from tentative to certain. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Oliver rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply. I have loved you, I think, since you stood in the hall that first night and refused to be frightened away by talk of curses. Olivia smiled, joy filling her like sunlight after endless rain. And I love you, not despite your scars or your past, but including them, all of you, Oliver. He drew back slightly, his expression serious once more. If we do this, if you agree to be my wife, society will talk. They will question why a duke would choose a viscount's daughter with a tainted family name. Let them talk, Olivia said with newfound confidence. We have faced far worse than gossip together. A slow smile spread across Oliver's face, transforming it completely. Indeed we have. He took her hands in his expression solemn once more. Olivia Wellington, will you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife, of sharing Thornfield Hall and whatever future awaits us, be it filled with sunlight or shadow, or most likely both? Yes, Olivia said without hesitation. With all my heart, yes. Their marriage, performed in the small village church near Thornfield Hall, caused precisely the stir in society that Oliver had predicted. The gossip columns buzzed with speculation about why the reclusive Duke of Ravencrest had suddenly chosen to wed a viscount's daughter whose family had fallen from grace. Some suggested financial motivations, others hinted at scandal or compromise. A few particularly malicious tongues suggested that the Duke, with his scarred face and strange ways, could not have secured a bride of appropriate standing. Olivia, who might once have been crushed by such talk, found herself remarkably unconcerned. She had faced entities that fed on fear and despair. The whispers of the ton seemed trivial by comparison. They'll find something new to gossip about by next season, Ophelia assured her as they sat together in Thornfield's garden, enjoying the summer sunshine. And those who matter will see the truth when they meet you. Indeed, as months passed, and the couple began to appear more frequently in society, the whispers gradually shifted. Those who encountered the Duchess of Ravencrest found her to be gracious, intelligent, and surprisingly well-suited to her position. If she occasionally seemed to see things others didn't, or if rooms sometimes grew quiet when she entered, these eccentricities were eventually accepted as part of her charm. The Duke himself underwent a transformation in public perception. No longer the scarred recluse, but a man visibly devoted to his wife, respected for his management of his estates and his quiet philanthropy. When he and Olivia established a foundation for the study and preservation of ancient knowledge, with particular focus on responsible handling of artifacts from other cultures, it was regarded as a noble scholarly endeavor rather than an eccentric passion. Thornfield Hall, once shrouded in shadow and whispers, became known for its light, both literal, as more windows were uncovered, and gardens restored, and metaphorical, as the Xavier family hosted gatherings that brought together scholars, artists, and forward-thinking members of society. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Oliver found Olivia in the library where they had begun their strange journey together. She stood before the shelves, selecting volumes for their newest project, translations of texts that might help others understand the delicate boundary between the seen and unseen worlds. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, presenting her with a small package wrapped in silver paper. Olivia unwrapped it carefully to reveal a miniature portrait, not of either of them, as she might have expected, but of a golden box. "The Pandora reliquary?" she asked, puzzled. "A reminder," Oliver said, taking her hands in his, "of how curses can become blessings when faced with courage and love." Olivia smiled, understanding. "Our beginning, and the reason for all that followed," He drew her close, his scarred cheek pressing against her hair. "I once believed I was cursed to stand alone in the darkness. You showed me that even the deepest shadows can be banished by love's whispers." "Not banished," Olivia corrected gently. "Transformed. The shadows are still part of us, Oliver. But they no longer rule us." As if in agreement, the library seemed to shift around them, not with the unnatural darkness of the entities, but with the natural play of sunlight through windows, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across the floor. A reminder that both were necessary, both were natural, and both were part of the life they had built together. "To transformation, then," Oliver murmured, bending to kiss her. "And to love that neither fears the darkness nor denies it, but walks through it hand in hand toward the light." And in Thornfield Hall, where ancient shadows had once roamed and whispers had once terrified, a duke and his duchess continued their remarkable journey, bound not by curses but by choice, not by fear but by love, facing whatever came next as they had faced the past. Together,